I signed a marriage contract with the mafia boss Dante Moretti, the man the entire city calls the Devil's Hand. He placed a check and a contract in front of me and said, "This is your price." I signed it, trading my freedom for my family's survival, and became the wife of the most powerful man in the city. The press called me the Devil's Contract Bride. I thought he despised me. But when I heard that the man who once hunted my father had vanished, I began to wonder, could the one who made him disappear be Dante himself? I didn't know that from the moment I signed my name, I had already become the woman he swore to protect, with his honor and with his blood. I only know one thing. In the world of the mafia, to love means to die, and he chose that death, so that I could live. That day in the lawyer's office, I sat across from Dante, my hands shaking as I held the pen. The room was cold, all glass and steel, like it was built to keep secrets. My dad's debt hung over me like a noose. Years of bad choices, gambling, borrowing from the wrong people. The Moretti family didn't forgive, and Dad had crossed them one too many times. I was 24, working double shifts at a diner, barely keeping the lights on in our tiny apartment. When they came for him, I begged for a way out. That's when Dante's people showed up with the contract. "Marry him," they said. "Clear the debt, save your dad." I signed, and the weight of it settled into my bones. I looked at Dante, tall, sharp suit, eyes like a storm cloud, and he didn't even glance at me. Just slid the check across the table. $50,000, my price. The wedding was a blur. A small courthouse, a judge who wouldn't meet my eyes, and Dante standing like a statue beside me. I wore a plain white dress I'd found at a thrift store, the hem a little frayed. No flowers, no music, just the scratch of the pen on the marriage certificate. When it was done, he turned to me, his voice low. "This is business, Elena, nothing more." I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't expect love, I didn't even expect kindness. But when we walked out and the cameras flashed, the headlines started screaming. "Mafia Bride, the Devil's Rented Wife." They tore into me, my cheap dress, my messy bun, the way I clutched my purse like it was a lifeline. I wasn't a lady, they said. Just a nobody who'd sold herself to a king. At the mansion, things got worse. The staff whispered when I walked by. "She's not one of us," they'd say, loud enough for me to hear. "Just a replacement." I tried to keep my head down to focus on why I was there. Dad was safe now, hidden somewhere far away. But every day felt like walking on glass. The maids would forget to bring me dinner. The guards smirked when I passed. One night, I overheard two of them laughing. "She's no Mrs. Moretti. She's just the help in a fancy dress." I stood in the hallway, my hands balled into fists, and I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I adjusted the strap of my bag, took a breath, and kept walking. I wasn't going to let them see me break. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen, trying to make myself a sandwich because the staff had forgotten my lunch again. A woman named Carla, the head housekeeper, walked in, her lips curled in a sneer. She was older, with sharp eyes, and a voice that cut like a knife. "You're in my way," she said, shoving a tray of glasses onto the counter so hard one nearly fell. I stepped aside, but she kept going. "You think you're special? Parading around in that cheap dress like you belong here? You're nothing but a debtor's daughter." I set my knife down, slow and deliberate, and looked at her. "I'm here because I chose to be," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You don't get to decide what I am." She froze, her mouth open, then turned and stormed out. I went back to slicing my bread, my hands steady, but my heart was racing. I wasn't invisible, not to myself. On our wedding night, Dante called me into his study. The room was dark, all leather and wood, with a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. He sat behind his desk, his face unreadable. "My bed is off limits," he said, his voice like ice. "This is just a contract. You stay out of my way and we won't have problems." I stood there, my cheeks burning. I wanted to tell him I didn't want his bed, didn't want his pity, didn't want anything from him. But all I said was, "Fine." One word, sharp and steady. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. But he turned away and I walked out, closing the door behind me. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. The morning after, I found a single rose on my bedside table. No note, no explanation. It was fresh, deep red, the petals soft under my fingers. I stared at it, confused, wondering if it was a mistake. Nobody in the mansion had shown me kindness, least of all Dante. I tucked it into a glass of water, my hands careful, like it might break. Later, I caught one of the maids watching me, her eyes narrow. "Who left that?" she asked, her tone sharp. I shrugged, keeping my voice even. "Does it matter?" She didn't answer, just walked away, but I could feel her resentment like a weight. That rose was the first thing in the mansion that felt like mine, and I guarded it like a secret, checking it each night before I slept. Hey, before I go on, I just want to take a quick second. If this story is hitting you, if you've ever felt like the world's written you off, could you do me a favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and maybe subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to share this with you, and I'd love to know you're out there listening. All right, let me keep going. A few weeks later, they threw a banquet for the city's underworld, the kind of party where deals are made in whispers and power changes hands over champagne. I was told to be there, but not as Dante's wife. "Stand behind me," he said, his tone flat. "Don't speak unless I tell you to." I wore a black dress they'd picked out for me, too tight, too flashy. Nothing like me. The room was packed. Men in suits, women dripping in jewels, all of them watching me like I was an exhibit. I stood behind Dante's chair, my hands clasped, while he talked business with people who didn't even look at me. Then she walked in, Isabella Romano, a mob boss from the north side, red lipstick, sharp smile, the kind of woman who owned every room. She leaned across the table, her eyes raking over me. "A dog in diamonds is still a dog," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The table laughed, my face burned, but I didn't move. I just met her gaze and held it. 1 second. 2. The laughter died down. During the banquet, a man named Victor, one of Dante's lieutenants, approached me when Dante stepped away. He was slick, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a glass of wine in his hand. "You're out of your depth, sweetheart," he said, leaning too close. "This world eats girls like you alive." He reached out like he was going to touch my arm, but I stepped back, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "I've survived worse than you," I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. His smile faltered and he backed off, muttering something under his breath. I stood straighter, my eyes scanning the room. Nobody else noticed, but I felt it. A small victory, like I'd claimed a piece of ground in their world. I wasn't just standing behind Dante anymore. I was standing for myself. Later that night, Dante was negotiating with some guy about a shipment. I overheard something, a name, a place, that didn't add up. I'd heard my dad mention it years ago, something about a setup. I leaned forward, my voice quiet. "That deal's a trap. Check the docs." Dante froze, his jaw tight. The room went silent. He turned to me, his eyes cold. "You're not qualified to sit at a man's table," he said. The words hit like a slap. I could feel everyone staring, waiting for me to shrink. Instead, I laughed, low and bitter. "Did you forget? I once saved your life, and now I'm the insect you crush." I didn't wait for his response. I turned and walked out, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "Who the hell is she?" The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No signature, just a scrawled message. "You don't belong here. Leave, or you'll regret it." I crumpled it in my hand, my pulse pounding. I didn't tell Dante. I didn't tell anyone. But I started noticing things. My clothes misplaced, my room's lock tampered with, shadows moving outside my window at night. I wasn't scared, not exactly. I'd grown up dodging my dad's creditors, hiding in alleys when things got bad. But this was different. This was personal. I started carrying a small knife in my purse, tucked under a scarf. One night, I caught a guard watching me too closely. I walked right up to him, my hand resting on my bag. "You got something to say?" I asked. He looked away, his jaw tight. I didn't need his answer. I was done being invisible. I didn't know it then, but I'd saved Dante's life years ago. I was 14, walking home from school, when I heard the explosion. A warehouse down by the river, flames licking the sky. I ran toward it, stupid I know, but I couldn't just stand there. I found a man bleeding out in the alley, his back torn open. I used my scarf to stop the bleeding, my hands shaking as I stitched him up with a needle and thread from my backpack. He was half conscious, muttering, "They set me up." I told him to run, to get out before they came back. He stumbled away and I never saw him again. I didn't know his name. But that night at the banquet, when I looked at Dante, I saw the scar on his shoulder through his open collar, and I knew. One evening, I was in the mansion's library, flipping through an old book to calm my nerves, when I heard footsteps. It was Marco, Dante's cousin, a man with a cruel streak and a habit of staring too long. He leaned against the doorframe, his voice dripping with mockery. "Reading, huh? Trying to play the part of a lady?" I closed the book, my fingers steady on the cover. "I don't need to play anything," I said, standing up. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're a liability, Elena, a nobody dragging Dante down." I held his gaze, my voice calm but sharp. "If I'm such a nobody, why are you so afraid of me?" He flinched, just barely, then turned and left. I sat back down, my hands shaking, but I opened the book again. I wasn't going to let him win. One night, I couldn't sleep. The mansion was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I wandered into Dante's study, looking for something to read. That's when I found the tape, tucked in a drawer. It was old. The label faded, but I played it. A woman's voice screamed, "Run! They're setting you up!" My voice. My hands went cold. I played it again, my heart pounding. Dante walked in, his face like stone. "Where did you get that?" he asked. I didn't flinch. "It's me," I said. 10 years ago, by the river. That's my voice." He listened, his eyes narrowing. Then he laughed, sharp and cold. "You expect me to believe that? You're playing me." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "You don't have to believe me, but the scar on your back. I was the one who stitched it." He went still, his hand brushing his shoulder. For the first time, he looked at me like I was real. After the tape, I started noticing Dante's glances. Quick, guarded, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. One evening, I was in the garden, pulling weeds to clear my head, when he approached. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, his hands in his pockets. I kept working, dirt smudging my fingers. Finally, he spoke. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. I paused, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Tell them what? That I saved a stranger? Nobody would have cared." He looked at me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "I cared," he said, so quiet I almost missed it. I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees, and met his gaze. "Then why do you keep me at arm's length?" I asked. He didn't answer, just walked away. But I saw his shoulders tense, like he was carrying something heavier than I could understand. The following week, I was summoned to a meeting in the city, some charity event Dante's people organized to clean up their image. I stood in the back, dressed in a simple gray dress, watching the crowd of polished donors. A woman in a fur coat bumped into me, spilling her wine on my sleeve. She didn't apologize, just sneered. "Watch where you're standing, maid." The word stung, but I didn't flinch. I dabbed the stain with a napkin, my movements slow and deliberate, then looked at her. "I'm not the help," I said, my voice even. "I'm Mrs. Moretti." Her face went pale, and she stammered an apology before hurrying away. I didn't smile, I just turned back to the crowd, my head high, feeling the weight of my name for the first time. Life in the mansion didn't get easier. I was still the outsider, the contract bride nobody respected. But something shifted with Dante. He didn't talk about the tape, but I'd catch him watching me, his eyes searching. I didn't push it. I wasn't there to win him over. I was there to survive. Then Ava showed up. A little girl, maybe 6, with dark curls and scared eyes. She appeared at the gate one night. No parents, no papers, Just a note with the Moretti name. The guards wanted to turn her away, but I couldn't let them. I brought her inside, gave her my sweater, and made her hot chocolate. She didn't talk much, just clung to my hand. Dante came home, saw her, and froze. "Who is she?" he demanded. I didn't know, but I wasn't letting her go. "She's staying," I said, my voice firm. He didn't argue. One night, I woke to Ava crying in her sleep. I slipped into her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and stroked her hair until she calmed. She mumbled something about a woman singing to her, a lullaby I recognized from my own childhood. It hit me like a punch. My mother used to sing it to me before she left us. I stayed there, humming softly, until Ava's breathing evened out. The next morning, I found a photo in her bag, crumpled and old, a woman with dark curls holding a baby. On the back, in faded ink, Maria and Ava. My stomach dropped. I didn't tell Dante, not yet. But I held Ava a little tighter, wondering who she was to him and why she felt like mine. A few days later, I was in the market buying groceries for Ava. Simple things, apples, bread, things she liked. A man approached me, his suit too crisp for the dusty stalls. "You're Elena, right?" he said, his voice smooth, too friendly. I nodded, wary, my hand resting on my bag. He handed me a business card, plain white, with a single phone number. "Call this if you ever want out," he said, glancing around. "Not everyone thinks you're safe here." I took the card, my fingers steady, and slipped it into my pocket. "I don't need saving," I said, turning back to the apples. He didn't push, just walked away. But that card burned in my pocket all day, a reminder that someone was watching, waiting for me to falter. Ava changed everything. I'd sit with her at night, reading stories, brushing her hair. She started calling me Lena, her voice soft like she was afraid I'd disappear. I didn't know why, but I felt like I'd known her forever. Then the attack started. Men in black cars circling the mansion, shots fired at the gates. Dante put the place on lockdown, but I knew they were coming for Ava. I didn't think twice. When the alarms went off one night, I grabbed her, hid her in the attic, and stood by the door with a knife from the kitchen. Nobody was touching her. Dante found us there, his face pale. "What are you doing?" he asked. I didn't look at him. "Keeping her safe," I said. He stared at me, something breaking in his eyes. The truth about Ava came out slowly. Dante ran a DNA test, his hands shaking as he read the results. She was his late fiancé's daughter. But then he found something else, a letter, hidden in a safe. His fiancée, Maria, hadn't died in that explosion 10 years ago. It was staged by Sebastian Crane, Dante's rival, to break him. Maria had been pregnant, and Elena, me, had been raising Ava for 3 years before the marriage in secret, moving from place to place to keep her safe. I didn't know her mother was Maria. I'd found Ava abandoned in a church, a note pinned to her blanket. "Protect her, she's Moretti." I did what I had to. When Dante told me, his voice was raw. "You kept her alive," he said, "all this time." I nodded, my throat tight. "She's family." One evening, I was teaching Ava to braid her doll's hair when a maid burst in, her face pale. "They're here," she whispered. I grabbed Ava, my heart pounding, and ran to the safe room Dante had shown me. But before we got there, a man stepped out of the shadows, tall, scarred, with a gun in his hand. "Hand over the kid," he said, his voice flat. I pushed Ava behind me, my hand tightening on the knife in my pocket. "You'll have to go through me," I said, staring him down. He laughed, but it was shaky. Then Dante's voice cut through the air. "Touch them, and you're dead." The man froze, then backed away, disappearing into the dark. I didn't move until he was gone, my arms still shielding Ava. Dante looked at me, his eyes fierce. "You're braver than I gave you credit for," he said. I didn't answer, just held Ava closer. But trust was hard to come by. I found out Dante had been watching me, cameras in the halls, bugs on my phone. Every move, every call, tracked. I confronted him in his study, my voice shaking with anger. "Am I your wife? Or your prisoner?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked away. Then the video hit. Grainy footage of Dante in a car. His arms around another woman, The headline screamed, "Betrayed Mafia Bride." My phone buzzed with notifications, strangers calling me pathetic, a fool. I couldn't breathe. I walked into his office, dropped my wedding ring on the desk. "I saved your life once," I said, my voice steady. "Not to become your captive." I left that night, my bag slung over my shoulder, Ava's hand in mine. As I walked away from the mansion, a car pulled up beside me, not Dante's. It was Isabella Romano, the mob boss from the Banquet, her red lipstick gleaming under the streetlight. "You're smarter than he deserves," she said, leaning out the window. "But you're still playing his game." I stopped, my hand tightening on Ava's. "I'm not playing anyone's game," I said, my voice sharp. She laughed, tossing a cigarette onto the pavement. "Keep telling yourself that, sweetheart. But you're still wearing his chains." She drove off, leaving me standing there, the word chains echoing in my head. I looked down at Ava, her small hand in mine, and I swore I'd never let anyone cage us again. Not Dante, not anyone. The night I left, I took Ava to a small motel, the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. I tucked her into bed, but I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the parking lot, my knife on the table. A knock came at 2 a.m. I grabbed the knife, my heart racing, but it was just the motel clerk, a tired woman with gray hair. "Someone left this for you," she said, handing me a folded scarf. Inside was a key, old and heavy, with a tag. "For Ava's future." I recognized Dante's handwriting. I clutched it, my fingers trembling, torn between anger and something softer. He was still trying to protect us, even after I'd walked away. I slipped the key into my pocket, my resolve hardening. I'd use it, but on my terms. It was raining when Dante found me. I was at a bus stop, Ava asleep in my arms, water soaking through my jacket. He stood there, his coat drenched, holding a sealed envelope. "Open it," he said. I did, my fingers trembling. It wasn't a marriage contract, it was a will, signed in his blood. "If I betray her, this blood will prove I lied," it read. Everything, his money, his properties, his name, left to me and Ava if he died. I looked at him, rain dripping down my face. "So this is how you love me," I said, my voice breaking, "in your own cruel way." He stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. "I didn't know how else to keep you safe," he whispered. I let him pull me close, my tears mixing with the rain. Days later, I found a locket in Ava's things, hidden in her pillowcase. It was silver, worn, with a tiny photo inside, Dante and Maria, laughing years ago. My chest tightened. I didn't want to feel jealous, but it hurt, seeing him happy with someone else. I slipped the locket into my pocket, not sure what to do with it. That night, Dante found me in the library, holding it. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice rough. I held it out, my hand steady. "Ava had it. I didn't want to upset her." He took it, his fingers brushing mine, and for a moment he looked lost. "She was my past," he said, his voice low. "But you're my now." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my heart pounding. The worst was yet to come. Sebastian Crane released documents claiming I'd signed the order that killed Maria. The mafia world turned on me. "Elena's the snake," they said. "She murdered Moretti's love." Dante had no choice. The council demanded a tribunal. They chained me in a holding room, my wrists raw from the metal. I looked at Dante, my eyes burning. "You believe the world, but not me," I said. He didn't answer, but his hands shook as he turned away. Before they took me, I whispered, "If this love is a sin, then let me die for it." I meant it. Every word. I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd saved him once, saved Ava, saved myself. If this was the end, I'd face it standing. In the holding room, a guard slipped me a piece of paper. It was from Dante, just 2 words. "Trust me." I crumpled it, my hands shaking. Trust him? After everything? But then I remembered his eyes when he saw Ava, the way he'd knelt in the rain. I tucked the paper into my sleeve, my jaw tight. Hours later, a woman came to see me, Maria's sister Clara, her face hard with grief. "You took everything from her," she spat. I looked at her, my voice calm. "I didn't know her, but I've been protecting her daughter." She froze, her eyes searching mine. Then she turned and left, saying nothing. I leaned against the wall, the paper in my sleeve burning against my skin. Before the tribunal, I was taken to a small room for questioning. A man in a tailored suit, one of Sebastian's allies, leaned across the table, his voice oily. "Confess, Elena, and maybe we'll spare the girl." I stared at him, my hands cuffed, the metal biting into my skin. "You don't scare me," I said, my voice low and steady. "And you'll never touch her." He smirked, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "You're betting on the wrong side." He shifted in his seat, then signaled for the guards to take me away. As they led me out, I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror, bruised, tired, but standing tall. I wasn't broken yet. The tribunal was a circus. Men in suits shouting, papers waving, everyone calling for blood. I stood in the center, my head high, saying nothing. Then Dante walked in. The room went quiet. He held up the forged documents, his voice steady. "If she's guilty, then so am I." He lit a match and burned them, the ashes falling to the floor. Then he pulled out another paper, an insurance clause, transferring everything he owned to me. The council gasped. He'd destroyed his empire, left himself with nothing. "They can't judge you," he said, his eyes locked on mine, "because there's nothing left to take." He knelt in front of me, his voice soft. "From now on, I'm no longer the boss. I'm yours." I couldn't speak. I just reached for his hand. At the tribunal's end, a man in the back stood up. Old, grizzled, a retired council member. He pointed at me, his voice shaking. "You're letting her walk? After what she did?" The room stirred, murmurs rising. I felt the weight of their eyes, their judgment. I stepped forward, my voice clear. "I didn't kill anyone, but I've carried the weight of your hate. That's enough." The old man sat down, his face red. Dante squeezed my hand, his grip firm. As we walked out, I heard someone whisper, "She's more Moretti than he is." I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd faced their fire and walked through it. Sebastian wasn't done. He wanted blood, and he came for it. He kidnapped me and Ava, dragged us to the old Moretti mansion, the one Dante's family had built decades ago. The air smelled of gasoline, and I saw the wires, explosives rigged to blow. Sebastian laughed, his voice cold. "Mafia love is a curse. It kills everyone." I held Ava close, her small body trembling. Then Dante came, alone. No guards, no weapons. He walked through the door, his eyes never leaving mine. I screamed, "Are you insane?" He smiled, that quiet, dangerous smile. "No, I'm choosing you." The explosion came fast, a roar that shook the world. I closed my eyes, holding Ava, thinking this was it. The news said we died, the Moretti couple lost in flames. As the smoke cleared, I woke in a hidden bunker. Ava curled against me, alive. Dante was there, his face smudged with ash, his arm bleeding from a gash. He'd pulled us out before the blast, using a secret passage only he knew. I touched his face, my fingers trembling. "You could have died," I whispered. He shook his head, his voice rough. "Not without you." I held his gaze, seeing the man who'd risked everything for us. I pressed my forehead to his, my breath shaky. We weren't free yet, but in that moment we were together, and that was enough. But we didn't die. A year later, I stood in a courtroom, an international trial for Sebastian's crimes. I wore a blood-red ring, the one Dante had given me that night in the rain. I held a document, the last one he'd signed, the rebirth contract. It turned his empire into a foundation for orphaned children, everyone carrying the Moretti name. I read the final clause aloud, my voice steady. "If I die, you live for me. If you live, I return." The room was silent. Then I saw him, a man in a black hat, standing in the crowd. He lifted his gaze and I saw Dante's eyes. He stepped into the light, his voice low. "We didn't die. We just signed again. With fate." I ran to him, my heart pounding, and he held me like he'd never let go. "I've been through it all. Heartbreak, betrayal, people looking at me like I was nothing, but I was never small. Neither are you. You've been unseen, dismissed, judged for where you came from. But you're still here, standing, carrying your dignity through it all. Keep going, keep shining. You're not alone. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below, and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally, healing.